Ready, Raj?
I'm ready.
Anytime, Jack.
Preston Jackson, we're talking on the occasion of your being inducted into the Lincoln Academy of Illinois. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you.
Thank you.
We're here in your gallery, in your studio in Peoria, Illinois. I'd like to begin with, you're an Illinois native, grew up in Decatur.
Mm-hmm.
How did you first get interested in art?
Well, it's quite some time ago. I'm from a family of 10 people. I have a twin sister, 3 sets of twins in our family. I became interested in art precisely at the age of 7. How I know is because of the drawings that my mother has presented me with, showing the dates, and of course I can recall some of the things I was fascinated with. But there are still drawings that exist when I tried to imitate things from comic books, newspapers, even audio things that I would hear on the radio. I would try to draw them.
Who encouraged you?
I think it was mainly my mom, by providing a safe and loving environment, which was very supported, by my father. In those days, of course, the father worked, and the mother brought up the family, which was probably twice the amount of work, to do, but a well-balanced program that they had. So she would always provide drawing instruments, musical instruments, things like that to sort of keep us occupied.
What attracted you to art? What was it that you could do on paper and in later years, of course, in metal that you needed to, that allowed you to express yourself?
I think it was the Sunday paper, the Sunday newspaper, Al Cap, Little Abner. I've never given him or that particular phase of my life that much credit before, but now, as I can recall, I was very much attracted to the cartoon drawings, the technical points, the over-exaggerated shapes, the human anatomy, and of course the humor. I think I could say that a lot of it began there, and also people in the neighborhood that had some talents, such as Billy Roll, which, he's a guy who passed away quite some time ago, and James Eccles. They showed me how to draw simple things, these sort of how-to situations. Yeah.
What about your education as an artist? Where were you trained?
My real training started with Mrs. Justine Bleeks, Stephen Decatur High School, and she was the one that encouraged me to pursue, to become an artist, to pursue my dreams. After a few other teachers tried to persuade me not to go on to college because that wasn't a thing that black men didn't do. So I was told, not to even think of it. But Justine Bleeks was a person that says, yes, you can, and go for it.
Tell me about that, though. You say that black men were not encouraged to go into art. What was that like to hear something like that?
Well, in many cases, it was very casual. It never shocked us because some of us believed it, I just didn't believe it, But that was, in Decatur, Illinois, Stephen Decatur High School, even the entire school system had these attitudes, and which occurred later in my development, going on into higher education at Millikan University. It was just kind of an unspoken rule that we were to somehow adjust to, and I refused to adjust to something like that. And luckily we had people like Mrs. Justine Bleeks, who took me out of sports, running and putting on stinky clothes and playing football, and to use my mind and not to bump heads and become all broken. So I went her direction. I'm glad I did.
You went to Southern Illinois University at Carbondale?
Right. Carbondale.
Tell me about the moving into higher education with a wonderful array of artists at Carbondale.
Well, those were special times, as anyone my age would know. We always speak very fondly because so much was happening then. both good and bad, you know. But the main thing that was going on was a sense of awareness. And all students read books. All students protested, took part in certain things that they were dissatisfied with, voiced their opinions. There was a very relaxed kind of atmosphere. We felt that we were all somebody. Our heroes were really looked at very closely, and the people that were not so heroic, you know, they were also looked at very closely. It was the right atmosphere to become an artist. I spent my sophomore years there, from sophomore up to graduate school, which was later, you know, at the U of I in Champaign. But Southern Illinois will always be, and always is, a special place in my heart. When I think of it, I see it in Technicolor. I see it, even the plants, you know, are different from up north. The climate is different, as you know. It's just a beautiful place to make art, and especially the teachers. Especially the teachers.
Let's talk about them some. Who had an influence on you at Carbondale?
Well, first of all, there's Milton Sullivan, and then there's the young Tom Walsh. He was very young at that time, but he was very instrumental in getting bronze casting, silicon sand shell casting here. He's affected so many people throughout the United States. Then there's Mr. Breland, who took us out to Virginia, took my little jazz quartet out to Virginia, Hampton, Virginia, where we performed Langston Hughes. And then there's Nicholas Vergette. God, there's so many. There's not Pat Paulson, but Paulson.
Bob Paulson.
Paulson, and numerous others. But these people were not in the classroom, not so much involved in administration work, but they were always there for you. I mean, any time of night. You know, we worked in the old glove factory. That's where the sculpture facilities were. I think at the time there was only 2 African Americans in the whole department, you know. Of course, we had our problems, but I can truly say that the instructors made us feel very welcome, because they were involved with a lot of the civil rights issues. I mean, physically involved with them also.
How did that find its way into your art? Because I've seen in the Bronzeville series and numerous other pieces around the studio today, I've seen so many things emerge. Tell me about that.
Well, there are so many numerous problems. I've always wanted to be able to sit down and paint a landscape and really feel it. I've always wanted to paint cityscapes, subjects that were a little more optimistic, a little bit more pleasing and beautiful, you know. But I've never been able to do that, you know. And unfortunately, because of my sensitivity, I guess, I'm so plugged in to things that are going on, and especially during that time. It sort of set the stage. I mean, if things were better, then my art would reflect that. But unfortunately, it's not. We're still having bad problems.
Well, I've seen, for example, and there was a little piece that I was looking at a little earlier, the one on child abuse. How do things touch you, and then you take that feeling you get and work with it and express it, maybe even exercise it? I get that kind of sense from the stuff you're doing. You're working a lot of the demons out.
Yeah, I think I see many things I can handle myself, but that's that old macho that's that macho stuff that says I can handle it on my own, and but when you're married to a very beautiful woman such as I am, and you see her for the first time being exposed to racism, it really grabs you. Or my girls, Natalie and Alice, to witness them react to a racist act for the first time in their, in their lives, you know, whereas they did everything right. I mean, one daughter was valedictorian at her high school, and the other is a writer. that can write. I mean, you know, Gwendolyn Brooks had read some of her stuff. It just blew her away. But you see them for the first time reacting to racism. And so then it affects me, because before I can handle it. But the people you love, when they're affected by it, you know. So that anger, or that, it stays with me. And if I do something, play something on my guitar, it comes out, I'm expressing my emotional concerns, you know. Somewhat flavored or disguised by the beauty of it. It's like in art, you know, it's like a shell until you're sort of taken inside of it, and then you see the real meaning of it, you know.
I've looked at many pieces of yours today, and I've seen the faces emerging from chaos, and the various, the very organic textures and forms coming out of it. How do you visualize these things when you sit down to begin to work?
Well, I'm always working with this idea of dualities, the yin-yang of life, the good, bad, you know, this balance between so many things. Never to get out of balance, because if I would, it's like Bill Cosby said, you know, he wants art around him that reminds him of good things. You know, I can agree with him. The same thing. You know, I don't want to always be singing the blues, you know. Sometimes I want to play music that is uplifting. So I'm constantly, in my work, balancing this, you know. I like for more of it to lean toward more positive things, but many times it's difficult for that to happen because it's not me, it's not what I experience. And, you know, all people are racist. Racism isn't a one-sided situation. We all have this in us, you know. We all have that ability to prejudge, and that's the disappointment that I find in mankind. I think that our schools, our government, I mean, you know, there's things that can be done to help offset this kind of problem. But getting back to your question, yeah, there's this fight between good and evil, sometimes shielded by a beautiful outer structure that is you know, a general statement, a total statement, until you really analyze what it is, what it's doing, the concept behind it, and then it reveals its true self. And that always happens in my art.
What do you want people to take away from your art, from the experience of having looked at it, touched it, and internalized it?
Well, I want them to leave my art by, well, with something optimistic, for one thing. I want them to feel that this is a lesson that's transferred through the eyes of an artist, through the eyes of a very sensitive person, and hopefully they go away with the feeling that I could do something about this, or I must be more aware of it, I must speak about it. I just want them, you know, it's a learning thing. It's a teaching object, you know. And like the slave ship, you know, that's what it is. That's what I want them to see.
I wanted to ask about that in particular because there's so many things going on in that ship. Everywhere you look, there's a lesson. How did you get the idea for it and then start to make it tangible?
Well, it started off as a vessel. You know, many times I sort of refrain from calling it a ship. It's like a container. It's, you know, you'll see a lot of wheels on my work. This is many different sailing vessels or steam-powered vessels in one. The ship that we're speaking of is one that is in Chicago on the Navy Pier. But there are many different ships in one. It changes faces. It changes faces simply because when the individual is looking at it, they move slightly, it becomes something else. It even takes you into inside the skeletal structure, and you see these little rooms that are underneath the deck. And so it's like a vessel that carries dreams, ideas, forcibly and not so forcibly. There's the Mersey, which was an Irish ship in the 1920s that brought the Irish over here during the potato famine and what they had to endure. And then there's the SS St. Louis, the Jewish ship. Well, it wasn't a Jewish ship, but they brought Jews over here seeking asylum and later to return back to Germany where many of them were put to death. So This is a teaching vessel that tells us never to forget these things. Because when you talk to, I listened to an interview, skinheads, that they were talking about racism and who they are and the Aryan race and all that stuff. I kind of felt sorry for them. I didn't dislike them at all, And I felt sorry because they did not understand history. They did not understand the millions that were sent to labor camps, or the millions of people that were slaves, that were pushed overboard, that jumped overboard, that committed suicide during the Middle Crossing, and the plight of the Irish who came over here, the conditions. A lot of them died. So my pieces teach.
Your pieces teach, and you teach. You teach at the Art Institute of Chicago. You teach here in Peoria and have taught around Illinois for the past 20, 30 years now. You don't have to do that. Why do you want to engage in learning activity with other people?
Well, I grew up as a teacher, Western Illinois, in Macomb, Illinois. That's where I had my real professional upcomings or whatever. My love for teaching, it started there. And I think that, I just feel that, we'll always need teachers. I think that happened, to me. I was very fortunate to have people like Marvin Clavin from Millikan in Decatur, Illinois, Millikan University. I was very fortunate to have him in my life, and I began to really understand the value of teaching. I sort of strayed away from.
It's all right.
Okay.
What does teaching others do for you?
Well, I guess I'm infatuated by the fact that you can see, feel, hear, sense, watch them grow. You can see them. I mean, you can talk to a child, and then you come back later, and they've grasped that concept, and they sort of spit it out, or in words, or either in some type of performance. And that's the delight. I enjoy seeing that happen. It's those things that you can't touch, but that you've constructed something in the mind of another person.
What does art do for people? It's one of the things by which we are human, that makes us human, the fact that we do create.
Well, art tells us how human we are. It tells us what being human is like, the fact that we all experience the same emotions, the same similar responses to everything. We're from some place, homes, families, our opinions are fabricated or formed in those kinds of structures. So I think that making art myself seems to get a little bit closer to that source. It helps to explain life, who we are, where we are, where we've come from, the mistakes we've made, and how we can make life better. There are so many good things about today, so many interesting things about today that although, like I said, there's this balance, the yin and the yang. There's so many bad things about today. This is why I believe that we're having problems with weather, for one. I mean, our earth is being covered. Our trees are being burned down. So many things that we're doing wrong, bulldozed over, and but anyway, like I said, with the invention of computers, the immediacy of information, there's a lot of good things, but there has to be that balance, and I mean, because many times we think that we can predict things, such as the weather, and all of a sudden here comes a storm, it takes out all the computers, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's still that basic nature, that natural, God-made thing that we have to pay attention to. Otherwise, all of the good stuff won't make it, it won't last.
One of the quotes that's attributed to you, you talk about being a vigilant observer, about the many wonderful similarities in all of mankind. What are the patterns and the themes that you see that you like to express?
Well, like I mentioned before, the whole idea of balance. Being a student and teacher of Tai Chi Chuan, I enjoy performing the pattern simply because I can physically and mentally enjoy that formula, you know, and all, you know, constantly revisiting that whole theme, the principles that I employ in my art, that I use in my art. I'm sort of in and out of it, in and out of it, never really out of it, you know, but being conscious of it as I build and make things, you know.
And seeking balance?
Right, right, seeking a form of balance. And if it's out of balance, you know, that's a lesson itself. Understanding the whole idea of so-called losing, why is it winning, you know, approaching things from a different perspective, and knowing that there are no losses, really, you know. In some way, everything is connected, you know. A void is waiting for something to fill it, so it's really not a void, maybe, you know.
I'd like to ask about how your art has changed over the years. There's a quote by an artist that I like a lot, Gustav Klimt, from the German secessionist movement, where he's talking about to each age its art. What does your art say about this age?
About this age? Well, I'm still trying to keep that human element, that hand-touched, hand-formed element in my art. The organic sort of versus the machined geometric shapes, you know. And this is why you'll see a lot of organic shapes surrounded by these geometric shapes. You know, it's life. This is what we are. Whether you live in New York or Bement or Macomb, you know, it's still that same thing. We rely upon man-made, machine-like things. So what it's, you know, that's what my art is sort of involved with. I want to keep that human element in my art. And I guess, you know, the concept itself being a very strong, emotional, or passionate kind of idea, I want it to be reflected in my art, you know.
Who were your artistic heroes? I see in some of the bronzes here, the Nubian statues, I see some of Rodin there.
Yes, definitely Rodin. You know, if we're talking about the very famous from years ago, the name Rodin would immediately crop up. Charles White, who exhibited at the U of I when I was over there as a grad student, Charles White. I think one of my strongest influence would be Richard Hunt of Chicago, Illinois. I like Peter Fagan's work. To me, Peter Fagan is probably one of the best figurative sculptors in this country, you know. Little is known about him, but, you know, he's beginning to move. I consider him equal to Bruno Lucchesi's work. Who else? Well, I mentioned Richard Hunt. I think Richard's probably one of the strongest influences.
I strayed a little from my own question a little earlier when I was starting to ask about how your own art has changed over the years. Can you detect any ways in which, well, as you've matured, different things express themselves in your art? Different subjects interest you, and you don't want to you don't want to remain static. You want to keep growing.
Right, right, right. Well, another influence, not particularly a person, but an environment, which was Chicago. All of a sudden, and Anne Mullen, she stated this. She's another artist. She says, "Preston, your work has just changed so much. I hardly know you anymore." When I went to Chicago in 1989 to teach at the Art Institute, my work just it completely turned around. I served on panels, you know, at the School of the Art Institute as one of the critique panels, and every year we do it twice a year, and you know, we're involved in critiquing works of graduate students and even works of our own, you know, among the instructors. But I think that having been selected to teach there, that has been a big influence on my art, on my life. You know, I really, even during the summers, I miss being up there because of that kind of environment. You know, you see and you feel so much. But my work has changed quite drastically because of being in that environment.
Is it because you're plugged into such a thriving metropolis of people and imagery and sights and sounds?
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, especially on the streets. During my lunch hours, after hours, the musicians, I mean, high quality. Chicago is a city. I mean, it's a big, wonderful, nasty, bad, interesting, beautiful. I mean, if you can't make it there, you know, that's where you're taught. You know, just being there, you can feel it, and that's what has happened to my art. And now you know, it's like I can't stop. I can't. I mean, every day I want to be in that studio.
Where do you see yourself going?
Well, I want to continue to talk about, to speak about, to model about history. I want younger people, especially the so-called gangbangers and all of this negative energy that somehow our kids tend to drift toward. I want them to turn around and look at how a people so devastated by racism and slavery have made such a comeback, you know. And I'll devote the rest of my life teaching that in my art.
I was really moved by the one picture here of the drive-by shooting. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, okay, yes, that's a painting of a drive-by shooting. It was an incident that happened. It was the first time I had picked up a brush in a long time. I taught painting at Millikan University, and after that I never painted for a long time. I directly went into sculpture. But anyway, and I didn't mind the lack of technical skills being seen in this, because I wanted to be kind of pure, as though I was back at the age of 12 drawing things without having to worry about correct color mixing and stuff. It leaves it open to, you know, as a pure response. And this was my impression. A young man was killed by a drive-by shooting. Senseless murders, you know. Silly, senseless, crazy stuff. He was on his way to college. He was out of the so-called hood, but he went back one more time just to tell the homeboys goodbye, you know. Mm-hmm. Well, they were playing cards and drinking beer in a sack. And you know, as they were speaking to each other, a sedan drives by, and a clown-like figure jumps out and starts firing at random in that direction, maybe mistaking them for, but just the craziness, the stupidity of it all. I recorded it. The young man was killed, never fulfilled his dreams, and it's something that happens over and over and over. And it's like a cartoon. It's colorful. Like on the license plates, you see idiots, tinted windows, the bright clothing, sports clothing, you know, that we don't own or manufacture. All of the kind of stuff, you know, the shoes, the tennis shoes with teeth, and all of that type of paraphernalia, and somehow the money doesn't go back in educating the children. But it was my way of and I put it in a cartoon form because kids, you know, they'll drift toward this and they'll look at it, you know.
Okay. One of the things that struck me about the picture was the fact that the guy who's doing the shooting, his skull is empty. Why's that? Right.
I noticed that too. No, I don't notice, but that's one of those things that, you know, a little bit of the symbolism that I included, you know, it's like a brainless act, you know, and not only does his hat fly off, but the top of his head sort of flies off as he fires this gun. And very overweight, I mean, because he probably sits at home and just watches television or movies, you know, and so I'm trying to show that, you know, inactivity of the body, of the mind, you know, produces something that takes this shape where it becomes a predator-like thing that just fires guns at people, you know, and guns meaning, you know, things that are just dumped into the community. I have another, can you see the drawing back there?
Yes.
Yes, that's called the arena. And this one person, Dr. X, or with a question mark, where the guns are just dumped into the arena, you know, and they're all made here in the United States, in Italy, and places like that. Now they're making guns where they leave no fingerprints. I mean, the art of killing dumped into our, you know, I mean, it's just crazy what's going on. It's just so, it doesn't make sense at all.
Is that part of a reflection of the popular culture that we have? Everything, life is so cheap, and people get shot, but you never see the funeral.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's also a part of not just, you know, with children, but the fact that we don't care. No one's teaching our children. No one's raising our children. No one is showing them. No one is guiding them. So, someone at the top, someone that's in the position to do something about this, they're not doing it.
How are you trying to change that with art?
Well, by speaking about it, by putting it out there, by exhibiting, you know, by causing questions like the ones that you're asking, you know. This isn't a beautiful landscape, you know, at all. This is another type of imagery that you're drawn into. This is another kind of involvement. I mean, you're not going to look at this years from now as a art historian and say, well, this is just a neighborhood and the kids are playing and having fun, you know, playing. No, this is going to make you think. And this is why everything is to the point. Everything is visible. It's not very modern, or it's not abstract, you know. It's right in your face imagery, you know.
It's the artist a social critic.
Right,
An observer.
Yeah, or a commentator.
In one other thing I want to ask about has to do with, let the person walk a little bit further. The arts have come under criticism in recent years from the politicians. How do you feel about the attacks on the National Endowment for the Arts, and how public funding is being used, or in some cases people feel it's being misused and abused?
Mm-hmm. Well, it just goes to show what I've always known, what we all realize, is the fact that the insensitivity that takes place in areas where people have the ability to change things. I mean, the problems that we have with governmental bodies such as the IRS and the tobacco unions and factories, the fact that they can put this poison out here and they know about it. I mean, there should be a governing body that would use common sense and say that this is bad for you, you know, or this is wrong, you know. It seems like a wrong should be dealt with immediately, the same way we declare war in little countries. You know, we should be able to deal or declare war on these real problems. My art, in a way, this is the only voice. This is the only voice that I have, be it very, I don't know, I don't think it's heard that much, but at least I'm serving my personal purpose. I'm doing my best to put it out there. Yeah.
Do you think there will come a time when your art will be more serene, going back to that landscape you were talking about when we first began chatting?
Well, there was a time that I thought that racism would end in my lifetime, but it hasn't gotten any better. There's homophobia that has swept our country. There are people, simply because their sexual preferences, that are being treated like criminals, you know, still in this day and age, you know. So, you know, I don't think that it's going to change in my lifetime. I'm just making an effort as much as possible, you know, because art, to me, this is why I work in bronze. It lasts forever, you know. So someday, hopefully, people will stumble over these little things and say that this artist was trying to say this.
I was going to ask you about that. What is your favorite medium?
Well, I enjoy drawing, you know, and that's drawing is a form of some type of therapy for me. It relaxes me. I enjoy drawing. I think that's the media that I can quickly put down my ideas, you know, without having to think. Therefore, you can just, you know, grab something out of your mind while it's still very fresh and still very charged, you know, with emotions, and put it down quickly. My favorite media, I have to admit, is bronze. for the fact that I take something through various stages, which reminds me of life, death, rebirth, you know. So it's bronze casting, foundry work.
How does it represent all of those?
Well, you usually begin with something from the earth, which is clay, and you model it with your hands. You know, how basic can you get? I mean, as long as man stood on this earth, that was something that he could do, you know, from then on until today. Well, you take this through another stage. You take a mold from it. Then you reproduce it in wax. There it lives again, okay, because the mold is the void, which is the negative. It's gone. It has died.
Yeah, I told him you were doing an interview, so he left
Oh.
because he had to do something later this afternoon.
Good.
Okay, Jack, anytime.
Okay. Let me see. I think what I said was something like, what does that represent? Going through all the various stages with making bronze.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I feel that again, you know, I'm attracted to the magic of, well, the idea of something taken from the earth. Kind of death that occurs, and it's reborn in another form, and then that is repeated. So the idea of, you know, this kind of cycle that goes on and on, you know, where does death end, where does life begin, you know? I can see this very beautiful cyclic pattern that takes place, meaning that it's a circle, it never ends or never begins. So when I bronze cast, when I'm involved with bronze casting, that same thing occurs. You can take something as basic as earth and form it with your hands, which is something that's been done, you know, thousands of years, millions of years ago, and still being done today. I create a pattern, and this pattern is formed by my mind magic, you know, what I see, what I feel, you know. I make it live again in another material, from a pattern, which is earth, to wax, from wax to bronze. And between those processes, there's the mold making. So that's what I'm attracted to. Even the spruing systems and the gas escape vents that we attach to it. It's like veins in the body that carry life to these places and cause it to grow. So there's all of that involved in it.
And as you said, it lasts forever.
Right, bronze is a very strong material. I mean, it's here for a long time.
Let's see. As you look back over your career, and it's been a rich one, and we wanted to certainly see it go on and on. Before I go to that question, I didn't ask about the Bronzeville.
Oh, Bronzeville to Harlem.
Yeah, I didn't ask that. I got to ask about that because we've got some pictures from that.
Oh, good.
What inspired that?
What inspired Bronzeville to Harlem? Well, 3 years ago, I decided to work on a different scale. I had so many ideas in my head. How can I say as much as I can, as quickly as I can? Well, the answer was to reduce the scale, and that meant a lot of figures. What subject is very close to my heart? Duke Ellington, Count Basie. Where did they come from? Places like Harlem, places like Chicago, you know. Favorite subjects of mine, the automobiles, the glamour, the costumes. I mean, these things existed. The pride, for one thing, especially, you know, the soldiers, the musicians. Many musicians possessed the ability to read music. There were orchestras. They owned these buildings, you know. I mean, they had neighborhoods where people did not lock their doors, where people walked the streets freely, and nothing like gang or violence or drive-by shootings. Of course, that did exist, but it was by people like, you know, Al Capone, and there were the black mafia, like, I don't want to use the word mafia, but black crime organizations, but not on the scale or the type of involvement that we see today. Here it's unexpected and it's at random, and a lot of innocent people die from it, you know. But anyway, the pride and the glamour, the color, the sounds, all of that. So I begin to construct this, to reconstruct it as realistic as possible, meaning you can never go home and repeat anything again or rebuild it. But to a certain degree, you could construct things and make people, cause people to inquire, to read about, and to remember, and to teach. Yeah.
And it keeps growing.
It does. In fact, I just cast about 12 figures just recently, along with the automobiles. We're going to saturate this with activity in the form of figures and all of this movement that happened, because that's how it was, judging by the old photographs that I'm working from.
Now, I'm going to ask you, as you look back over your career, what do you think your lasting legacy will be?
Well, I hope it will be that of a person that's giving, a person that enjoys the art of giving, a person that recognizes the value in giving. I think that's what I enjoy mostly, I've never thought of myself as obtaining a lot of wealth or anything like that, but I want to be able to maybe point the way to others so that they can obtain happiness in some form, So I think the thing about giving, that's very big with me now. Maybe it has always, but now it's a little different because I have a lot of time behind me, and I understand the value of different attitudes, priorities, things that we work hard for, and the material things just seem to not be it. But the fact that you can give something to the mind of a younger person and watch them light up with knowledge, that's what I want to do.
Wonderful note to close on. Preston, thank you so much for the time today. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for doing it.
Oh, it's been fantastic. We need to sit here for a little bit so we can have something to roll some credits over.
Oh,
and
okay.
I do want to ask you at one other little thing before we go about actually getting the nomination to be in the Academy and all that.
Okay. Right. All right. I'll mention Jane Borland's name because she was the person that really was behind my getting it,
This is a good time?
Yeah.
Okay. And I always ask this of every laureate that I get the chance to talk to. What was your feeling upon getting the word that you were going to be nominated for the Lincoln Academy?
Well, first of all, I had to inquire what was it about, because I wasn't that familiar with it. And after I found out, I said, oh, this is that award, Ramsey Lewis. I mean, I'm naming these people, Gwendolyn Brooks, and I said, wow, maybe they made a mistake, I seriously thought they made a mistake because how did I deserve such an honor? But I guess not being aware of who you are, what you're doing so much, you just do it, And I guess evidently I've been doing the right thing. So Jane Borland, a very wonderful woman here in the city of Peoria. Jane Borland nominated me, and she also informed me that I was to receive it. Very gracious person, and anything that she has that she's involved with, I better take it serious, and so that's how it all came about. I'm very, very grateful.
Well, you're in wonderful company, and you have been doing some things right. There's no question about that.
Thank you.